All right, my name is David Johnson. I am the CEO and creative director at Undertone Effects. My friends call me DJ. And before that, I was the lead visual effects artist at Infinity Ward. I worked on Halo at Bungie. And I'm one of the organizers for the real-time VFX community, which lots of you guys are members of, so I recognize some faces. And if you don't know yet, you should know. We're having a party tonight in Emporium, so everyone come on down. I think this is, hopefully we'll all fit. We'll see. All right, let's dig in. So today, I want to talk about, there's sort of two parts to my talk, hitting the highest quality bar possible. I want to talk about, I want to demonstrate how and why at our studio we use continuously looping reference montages to raise the quality of the work that we're outputting. And I'm going to spend some time talking about stock footage and discuss the cases I prefer to use it in and demonstrate a couple of techniques for prepping footage for game engines. So first up, constantly looping reference montages. Before I explain exactly what that is, when an artist gets a task, the first thing that tends to pop into your head is, what are the elements I'm going to use? So for example, for a grenade, you're going to have some kind of flash, a glow, you might have a couple of spark elements, you'll need a thick smoke, maybe a wispy smoke, these could be animated, and maybe something that'll make some tendrils and give it a better profile, some dirt kick up, and so on. And if you think beyond just sort of the basic textures you're going to use in the effect, you might also have a light source, some distortion. It's awesome when there's a little radial blur kick at the point of impact on the explosion. You can have dirt kick up on the screen. Maybe the effects team does that. Maybe that's a UI task. Post effects and lighting changes can occur. And even outside of the effect you're working on, maybe nearby players that get partially impacted have some pebbles raining around them for a little bit. So all right, that's the jumping off point, right? We're doing a grenade. We got some textures. Maybe we're missing a few, so we start to make them. But then often we'll go online and look at some reference. We'll find some stills, look at a couple videos online, and off to the races, right? We dig in. So I want to argue here today that if that is all you use your reference for, you're leaving some things on the table. If you're just doing it out of memory, there's a quality bar improvement that you're wasting. And here's what I mean by that. Let's look at another case, a little simpler. So here's snow, right? What are the elements for that? We've got, there's going to be snowflakes. Maybe there's some smoky, misty stuff you're going to use to create, if it's high wind and low visibility, you're going to pass a bunch of these by the screen and maybe create pockets of positive and negative space. That's about it, right? There's snow. Take those, define some motion, and you got snow and blizzard, and that's it. So instead, what we do at our studio is when an effects artist gets a task, the first thing we do is to build a montage. So we dedicate time for every artist, no matter how small or large the task is, to find every clip they can, video, capture, find playthroughs of video games, stills. If we can't find good captures, we'll let them get on the console and make some. We'll capture it ourselves. Let me kill the audio one moment. And from there, before a single particle is defined, I'll sit with the artists and we'll watch the montage together from start to end. This is one from some snow stuff we were just working on. I've got one version of this montage that's an hour and 20 minutes long. This is a little 15-minute sub-edit of it with just some of the best stuff. And we'll sit through the whole thing and just discuss what it is, what are the things we like about it. In the case if it's other games or something, we'll talk about if people missed the mark on something. What are those things and how can we improve upon it? And we'll quite directly ask, what is it that we're going to add that'll make this attempt better than every version seen in a game before. We find that this exercise sharpens our focus and gets right to the heart of what's great about an effect, as opposed to just executing elements in terms of textures moving over time. So in this case, right, we look at it, and if our basis was a snow texture and some misty stuff, well, what else? What are we missing if that's where we stop? Could we even do particles that are flipbook animations and rotate over time internally instead of just having a spinning profile? Is that worth the memory? Yeah, maybe it is. What about when the particles get close to the camera? Depth, do we want to have a depth of field blurred treatment so that the ones right near you look different? And let's just pop around this video for a little bit. What are some other things that we can observe that are interesting? Here's something you don't see in game engines very much, how the snow might interact with airflow and obstruction, right? If there's rooftops or barriers or objects where snow's collecting, when the wind hits it, how does it come off of those things? It's little details like that that you tend not to see in games, and I would argue sitting with these reference montages the entire time you're working at it will help you find those little details and help you make your effects better. Here's another treatment where it's a crisper treatment. It's a faster shutter speed. Here's an example of airflow changing over time. So right now it's kind of soft and just drifting downwards, and then all of a sudden some air violently kicks up and there's a ton of turbulence and there's a ton of fill. There's a detail you don't see often in a video game. And what is the motion inside of it? Is that misty texture that you were using before appropriate for that case? Should you make another one that handles crazier, more turbulent cases? What about this thing? This is pretty neat. Like, how would you do that with cards? Maybe a better way would be sort of a ribbon or a little cloth sim that's got a scrolling texture and blows, but it has its opacity ramped up when the wind is heavier, and it just kind of ramps down when it's not. What about when the snow hits the camera? This is one thing I've been chasing for a while that I haven't pulled off yet, is blur. What about having a particle just specify blur on the frame buffer? That'd be pretty cool. And another thing is, how about contrast elements? Snow is white. It's, white on white is hard to make look good. So what about introducing some debris in the air that provides some contrast element and helps reinforce the motion of the air if it's really windy? And so on. Now, there's our jumping off point. So once we've done that exercise, we ask that our artists keep these reference montages on monitors above their head. Every artist RCD has one. And we just keep them looping the entire time we're working on that thing. This is a little short video of our office. And it helps we're constantly sort of comparing our work to it, and it provides a point of reference. I've been doing this for several years now, and I'm a believer in its effectiveness. Now, what if your game is magic and spells and energy stuff? Well, in that case, your reference isn't film stuff, but it's other games, it's other movies, it's your competition. What are the other games that you've played whose spells really impressed you? Just cut videos of that. And to emphasize the point, for the rest of this talk, I'm going to keep this reference montage looping in the corner. And I would ask, peek at it from time to time. Look at it. See if you can find little details in there that you've never seen in a game before that you would be super impressed if that was in it. If you've got, these are all video clips here, but we'll often put still images in there too. A lot of times, you're from like real filmed, shaky phone cams, you're not going to get good lighting and stuff. But Maybe there's professional photographer versions of things that have good lighting. Include stills. Just hold them up in here for 5 or 10 seconds. If you've got concept art, put it in there too, and it'll just keep reminding you of your art target you're supposed to be hitting. And sub-montages too. Well, so the hour and 21 I mentioned, we've got 4 or 5 other littler cuts of this that focuses on just, the look of snowflakes or misty stuff or high wind scenarios and so on. So here's the point in my mind of doing this. One, it has you kick off every task with not just a list of elements, but how you intend to make this one the best one ever created. 2, it has you constantly picking out individual details across multiple videos that have little behaviors and looks in it. Then you can try to match. You will absorb these, and you'll notice them, and then you'll get excited about them, and you'll put them in your work, and it will get better. 3, it helps you immerse yourself in a range of styles. Often we'll have just one art target we're asked to hit. Have other styles in there too. There might be some killer motion that a realistic thing did, and then a cool layering thing that a stylistic example did. 4, this helps to be sort of a constant A/B comparison between your work and the real thing, or the best version that anyone's accomplished. 5, it helps with a comparison for timing and motion. Sometimes when we're defining motion, it doesn't feel right, and we have a hard time pinpointing what it is that's wrong with that. Well, if you're just looking at both yours and something like this simultaneously, it's a lot easier to sort of pick out what's wrong, or the guy next to you, ask them to compare it, and this gives a better point of reference. And 6, just to be a quality bar in the end. For every clip in this loop, just ask yourself if your work exceeds the beauty of it yet. And if it's not done. Just keep working on it. So the end goal in my mind is that for every single effect you tackle, the aim is to see that it's the best version of that thing to have ever graced a video game. Using constantly looping in-your-face reference like this is an important tool towards accomplishing that goal. Frame rate problems. All right, I'm going to talk about stock footage for a bit. What are things that are good to use stock footage for, what aren't? Explosions are great. I prefer stock footage specifically for explosions. There's a lot of good sim packages now, but I find that even in high-end movies these days, there's explosions that I'm not satisfied with. I still feel like film stuff. Whenever something can be filmed over simmed, I prefer the film stuff. But if you're doing magic and spells, it's not so much. We've all seen, Action Essentials has been around for a long time. A lot of us can pick out some of those clips. There's newer guys on the block, though. Effects Elements, Action VFX. They have some stuff that hasn't been in 1,000 video games, so it's being refreshed. And in fact, here's a look at, and by the way, I want to thank Action VFX for giving us permission to use a couple other clips in this presentation. So their websites have improved quite a bit. Now there's really nice previewing stuff. And if you're trying to find, if you've bought a library and you want to, this is a really easy way to just examine them quickly and find one that, will have a great profile or stays in frame well and will be easy to comp. And you can buy these in collections as well as $10 for individual ones. Especially, if you're new to this, if you're a student just coming out of school, you probably don't have the skills yet to render something this high-end. $10 for a killer explosion, that's not bad. All right, so why? A lot of the times work for effects artists in games is shader stuff. You're in the material editor and UE4, and that is super fun work. But in this case, sometimes that's better. Sometimes I'd prefer stock footage. Memory, we have a glut of these days. On Infinite Warfare, our budget for effects textures was 600 megs, which is pretty obscene. I don't know that anyone has a budget that high, but we put a lot of effort towards a lot of pretty big textures. And there's a runtime benefit too. If you're not doing shader calls, if you put all that detail into the texture itself, GPU is the thing we're bound on a lot of the time. So this sort of shifts the load over to memory. So that's a benefit. There's a lot of visual reasons why it's good. And in my mind, you just can't beat the quality in some of these cases. All right. So I'm gonna dig in to actually prepping one in front of you guys right now. Although I tried to squeeze this down to 20 minutes long, I couldn't. It was about 40. So I pre-recorded it, and I'm playing it back at double speed here. But I'm gonna just talk over what I did. So these are sort of the basic things. We're gonna do a fireball, and here are the steps that you take it through. You center it, kill the movement, crop time, fix the map up. Now, a lot of you guys have probably done plenty of After Effects stuff before. I hope that I can get a few sort of new little bits of information for you guys too. I'm going to show sort of how I approach it, how I organize my structure, how I do this across lots of comps. If you don't know about pre-comping in After Effects, it's fundamental. If you don't know yet about set mat and set channels, that is fundamental. How do you fix problems in the alpha channel? We're going to go through that. And just a couple other little things to make it go a little faster and more smooth. So let's just dig right in. All right, so here's the clip. We're going to take this fireball, and there's a few things. It goes up. We got to fix that. It clips the side. There's a little ground line that you could see before. So here's the structure. So I did a little folder prep ahead of firing this up. But you can see at the top there's comps. At the bottom there's source. And under comps, I've got a couple of different sections. Having an output comp is useful because it gives you a file name. If you're going to output this multiple times, it'll default to that file name. That's helpful. So usually I start with just the clip, dragged onto a comp, and that's the source. And then I will make that into an output one. And I tend to do one thing that may seem a little awkward. I'll sort of go backwards. So I'll start at the very end of this thing, the output thing, and then I'll sort of build towards the beginning a little bit. So here I am, 99. I'll name the next one in this sort of prep area. And then pre-compose. If you're not familiar with pre-compose, it takes everything in a composition and offloads it to another one so you can run operations on several things at once. In this case, I'm just using it as sort of a hierarchy. Think of this 0 to 1 to 99 as a node network in a way. So now I'm going to center this thing. Before that, I am going to make a little utility comp. This is something that I'm going to use in a couple of different compositions. So I open that guy, add a solid, set its size to the same size as the composition. And then down to its transform, I'll set its scale to 50%, its anchor point the same size as the composition. And now I've got a thing that will convey to me where the corner is and where the center is. And then I'll fade it down so that I can sort of see what I'm doing over that. Now I'll pull that into the comp I was working in O2 center. All right, so now I've got that point of reference. I can lock that thing and then start setting keyframes on this guy to put it right in the middle of the texture. All right, with that, next thing to do is it's going up. Let's stop it from going up. So again, I'll go to the 99 one and pre-comp it, layer, pre-compose. Number 3, this is kill movement. Again, I can bring that utility that shows me the center point in here, lock it, and then just start setting position keys over time. So go forward a little bit in time. It's already centered in the first frame. Go forward, recenter it, forward again, recenter it, and so on. Do a tiny bit ahead of the first keyframe, and there we go. Then you can adjust the keyframes and the Beziers a little bit to smooth out the motion. All right, so there it is, roughly now in place. All right, what's the next operation to do? So see how you can, part of the reason I do it this way is if you try to do everything in one composition with keyframes and something goes wrong, and it helps to sort of disassociate operations from one another. So if something doesn't go the way you wanted it to, it's its own sort of isolated operation, and then you can, in other comps, do other things, and there's not dependencies across a lot of different parts of the work. All right, time crop. So we don't need the whole back end of this clip. After about there, the frames are pretty useless to us. So find a point in time and then set the composition to that length. And this is one where you have to propagate it down to the next two in the chain. So 99 and then the output one. All right, so now they're both down to about 6 seconds of footage. All right, the next thing to do is clean up the mat. So it has to go away before that line chops it off, right? So we're gonna want a sort of radial mask that shrinks down on it and has a noisy edge. So how does one accomplish that? There's also a little, you can see sort of the ground line there. That ought to be fuzzied up and removed. So here we're gonna pre-comp it. So this part is a little bit more involved. This is gonna have a couple of comps that work together, and the idea is I'm splitting out the alpha into its own separate composition that I can then do some operations on. And then the RGB is going to be its own separate thing as well. So here I'm demonstrating, this thing started with already having an alpha channel in it. It was already had transparency. But if I want to do stuff on just the alpha channel all by itself, I'll add 2 layers, 2 solids, a black and a white, and these are going to become my new alpha mat. So here's, if you don't know this one yet, under Effect, Channel, Set Mat, you can redirect channels from one thing to another. So now I'm taking the alpha channel of the footage and making it the mask of this white solid. So now I essentially have a luminance for alpha, right? So this thing is a solid now that is essentially just an alpha channel. I'm doing the same thing with RGB, but using the Set Channels effect, and you can redirect the red, green, and blue to a white solid here. All right, next, I'm gonna start making some other layers to combine with this mat to fix up some of the problems that are in there, to get rid of that line. So I'm gonna do a radial wipe and a bottom fix-up. So for the radial wipe, I bring that isolated alpha channel in. I add a solid. Excuse me. Again, a black and a white. Go to a frame that looks interesting. And I'm going to actually change it to red and make it a little transparent so you can see what's going on through it. Grab the pen tool, just draw a circle around it. There we go. All right, then I'll start setting some keyframes. I'll give it a little feather, set keyframes on the path so it'll shrink down over time. Oops, wrong tool. All right, so I select all the tools. I just move them a little bit. That gives me a key on the 0 frame. Go forward, kind of to the end. And select the keys again. Select the points of the spline. Make it small, put it back in the middle. All right, so now I have a growing circle. A little smaller. Okay, so that represents it gone now. All right, so now I've got that circle animating. It shrinks over time. So I'm going to combine that with the mat in just a moment. But it's just a fuzzy edge, right? Just having it fuzz out from outward in is not very interesting. So I'm going to make another utility composition, animated noise. And I'm going to make this sort of a generic size, 3500 by 3500. Get rid of everything in it, make a solid that is white, and add not that one, noise, fractal noise. There's a couple types of it. I like dynamic. It looks a little more explosion-y. And I'll set an evolution keyframe on the start and end. And now, although my GPU will choke a little bit on it, now it's phase animating over time. So this thing isn't just still, it's sort of roiling. Sometimes with animated noises, you can kind of see them beat to like keys. So in this case, I duplicated the thing, set it to overlay, and then time offset those evolution keyframes. So now I've got two different ones that are sort of like beating through one another to get rid of that little pulse that it had. So the white and black point aren't that good. So again, I'm going to select these both and pre-comp them. Call it animated noise pre-levels. And then I can run an operation on the both of them. So set the black point, set the white point. And then here's where it gets interesting. So now we'll go back to sort of a standard alpha channel style. Make this white again, give it full opacity. And then I will bring that animated noise into this comp, set it to overlay. And now it is only affecting the gradient. So black stays black, white stays white. But everywhere that the feather is going on, you now have sort of like an erosion thing happening. Okay, so the bottom fix-up, in the interest of time, you kind of do the same thing. You put a solid in, draw a line, animate it over time, put the noise in there. I'm going to skip that in this case, just because running out of time. And there is more time in this video than I have, so I'm just going to sort of jump ahead. From there, you can use set mat and set channel to sort of, so basically I just multiplied those alpha channels together. So the alpha channel, that radial noise one, and then I have another comp where it combines it back into the RGB. And then I find and crop it down. And then time, so this is 6 seconds plus at 60 FPS. I want it to be 64 frames. So one thing to know is there's different ways in After Effects to modulate time. The best in my mind is you can set under layer, there is a frame blending option to pixel, and then there is a time remapping thing. And basically, if you just have something in there that's 6 seconds, make your comp 64 frames long, put time remapping on it, and just put a key in the end and move it as far up as it goes, you've just told the entire span to then clamp to that 64 frames. It just basically has it run the entire thing over the span of your composition. So now it's 64 frames long. And everything I've done up to this point has been non-destructive. I try to save time remapping and scaling toward the very end in case you want to output at a higher resolution later or lower. That can all be done. So there I am doing the time remap. And last thing is to scale it. I just have a comp that sizes it down to a 512 by 512. And then the last thing that I'll do in this case is I just render it out. And there's the frames. I'll talk about pre-multiply versus straight in just a moment. But last thing is to use glue it is the trick that I use. Basically just import all those, hit glue it, and save. And it turns it into an atlas. That's pretty handy. There's other ways to do it, but I find that one pretty effective and fast and easy. That is basically it. Very briefly, I'm already over time, so I'm just going to spend 2 seconds on this. You can now put pre-multiply or straight. Straight is the one you want to go. If you look at the bottom left, this is straight. The bottom right is pre-multiply. If you ever see a little rim around your texture, this is why this is done wrong. The correction to it is to use RGB straight. And that's all that time I have. Thank you, guys.